Music of Sol People. Written by Commercial Hour 7115. The Intergalactic Federation detected an anomaly on a small, dense, water-soaked rock planet accompanying a solitary middle-aged yellow dwarf star, buried deep in the outer arm of a field galaxy in sector Roth 7. The dominant organism was a land-based biped, a little strange considering that most of the planet was covered in water. The biped that called themselves humans exhibited rather strange behavior. Their civilization, as per the Federation, seemed to be grade 5 or below, barbaric in terms of technological advancement. Yet the humans had done the unthinkable. They had bent space, folded it like a piece of fabric, and called it a warp drive. A remarkable achievement for a grade 5 civilization, and a dangerous one. The Federation never approaches such worlds until their populations have matured and learned to rely on science, because a species that reaches the stars before it has outgrown its impulses is a danger to everyone already out there. The Federation sent scouts. They were primarily of a species called Noku, who by evolution were devoid of emotions and submitted facts as they were without bias. Their report stated that the humans were deranged and unpredictable, wasted considerable resources on useless things, and waged war against each other, mostly over their beliefs. A limited few thought rationally. Not worthy was the final word on the report. I voted with the majority when the Federation decided to annihilate the humans. I trusted Noku's judgment, as they were always accurate. The erasure, as it was called, was quick, and humans didn't stand a chance to fight back. The Federation was careful not to disrupt the other life forms. Since the humans' nuclear factories were, by design, the most inefficient ever built at extracting the power of the atom, the Federation kept a team posted on the planet and in its orbits until the system stabilized and the stage was set for a better life form to evolve. A minority of humans had survived the erasure. Stripped of their powers of destruction, they posed no danger, and the Federation let them live. Some of the other alien races found humans cute and adopted those left over as pets to their respective stations. I was part of the team assigned to identify human tech that could be useful for the Federation. Our task was to catalog the remnants before the decay teams moved in. Translators embedded in our comm systems handled sounds and scriptures in real time, so the assessment was easy. The planet was habitable for my species, but I wore the armor suit anyway and HEPA filters in my breathing apparatus, since the local microbes could pose a danger. On the eventful day, while cataloging the remnants under the rubble of the large structure called a library, the human word for a place where they stored data in books, a form of hard copy mostly written on the corpses of a fellow species that inhabited Earth, called trees, I found a live human called Clara. She was small. I know now that she was small even by human standards, but I had no reference for how tall the species could grow, so she simply seemed like a human, which was already more than I had expected to encounter alive. She had barricaded herself behind a wall of books. She held one in front of her face. "Don't," she said. One word. But from the frequency of it, the particular trembling quality, I stood there embarrassingly long, doing nothing in front of that biological specimen. I did not report her. I told myself it was scientific curiosity, a living specimen, irreplaceable data. But deep down, I wanted a human pet as well. The team was permitted to collect anything they liked while on scout. So I scooped her up as she screamed and threw books at me in a feeble attempt to fight, sedated her, and put her in my backpack to be assessed later. If she was not too feisty when she woke, I would adopt her, I told myself. The initial interactions with Clara were chaotic. She called me a murdering fuck. My comms translated it as profanity and declined to elaborate. I logged her at first as defective, an aggressive specimen possibly damaged in transit. It took me an embarrassingly long time to understand the obvious, that she was grieving, that her entire species had been wiped out by an alien race, and she was now somebody's pet. The bond between us grew slowly. It took more than 3 of their Sol years for her to accept me as her benevolent captor. She adapted faster than I expected. Within 2 lunar cycles, she had 40 words of standard convergence. Within 4, she was correcting my pronunciation, which she found funny. I wanted to learn more about humans because of Clara. She was more than a pet now. I admired their intelligence, their ability to adapt to anything. I began to doubt the Noku report. Were they wrong about them? Clara was impatient and sharp, and sometimes, when I asked her to explain a human thing a second time, she would make a sound through her nose that my translator could not classify and that I eventually understood meant "you're being slow and I'm choosing not to say so out loud." She did this at least once a day. It was Clara who led me to the music, a human invention of superimposed sounds produced by the vibrations of different metals, accompanied by human vocals. She had no instruments but built a few from whatever strings and metal tubes she could find, and sang to me what she told me was music. It grew on me. My fellow scouts would vouch for this, since they could see me banging the metallic tools against anything I could find, trying to reproduce the same vibrations. One day, Clara said we should scout Earth for music equipment. I agreed because music felt good. As we walked through streets being reclaimed by plants, we came upon a sign, "Second Spin Records." "Wait," she said, then wait. She said things in sets of 3 or 4 when something mattered. Inside, the roof had partly collapsed, and there was moisture damage along the wall and the smell of organic decomposition and old paper. But Clara walked in without fear, with an air of familiarity, like she belonged there. She pulled a large black disc from its sleeve and held it to the light, and the surface scattered colors across her face, and she said nothing for a moment. "This was my father's favorite," she said. Very quietly, her biosigns elevated, saline secretion at the optical ducts. I will try to describe what human music did to me the first time I heard it properly, and I will probably fail, and I think that's appropriate. The portable playback unit took 40 minutes to set up because I kept getting it wrong and Clara kept correcting me with diminishing patience. The first sound that came out was warped and slow like a voice dragged through water, and Clara made the nose sound and fixed it. And then it was right. The sound, John Coltrane, a saxophone, a recording from 1964, A Love Supreme, though I didn't know any of that yet, came out of the speaker and did not behave the way sound is supposed to behave. I'm aware that this is not a scientifically meaningful sentence. It reached. That's the word. It reached across the space between the speaker and my sensory organs and found something on the other side that I had not known was there. I do not know what that thing is. Clara watched me from the floor, sitting cross-legged, chin in her hands. "Well," she said. "What is he doing?" I asked. "Searching," she said. "That's what jazz is, people searching out loud." I sat down next to her. I don't remember deciding to. My legs were simply no longer holding me up. We listened to the whole record. Neither of us spoke. I watched the star move across the gaps in the collapsed roof and felt, in a way I cannot defend scientifically, like I was being told something important in a language I was only just beginning to learn. I longed for more. My superior, in his quarterly review, noted that I had a pronounced fixation on obsolete acoustic storage media that fell outside established documentation parameters and recommended I recalibrate my priorities. I didn't listen. We spent the months that followed pulling music from the ruins by the thousands. Among it was a cache of reel-to-reel master tapes from a place called Abbey Road, which Clara received in silence, a human response, I now realized, to an overwhelming flow of emotion. She was my guide, my translator. The word curator feels right, but also too small. She moved through those ruins like she knew them from a memory ages ago, handing me objects and watching my face to see what they did to me, sometimes pleased at what she saw there, sometimes irritated. She taught me genres with the dedication of someone who understood, without saying so, that this was the most important project either of us would ever work on. Blues, she said, is what you sing when the world has broken you and you need it to know that you noticed. Classical is humans trying to build something that lasts forever out of something that only exists while it's happening. Rock and roll, she grinned, in the way that moved all three freckles at once, is what happens when you give a teenager an electric guitar and decline to intervene. Punk is rock and roll with the art school parts removed and the anger doubled. Folk is memory, how people carry themselves forward. Gospel is the conversation with something you're not sure is listening but need to be. Jazz is the conversation between people, what you find together that you couldn't find alone. Then she undercut all of it. Mostly, she said. Some of it's just men showing off, and I've never been able to tell which is which. Never could. That's the part I like, actually. I listened to each vinyl as it crackled on the turntable. I asked her to fix the crackle, but she said it added to the authenticity, that it felt alive, as if nature were blending its own sound into the grooves. There was an evening when Clara played me Dark Side of the Moon while the Sol system turned below us. Her planet was still visible from the observation bay, still blue-green in places. The atmospheric alteration is slow. She didn't look at the planet. She looked at the speaker. I watched her face. "We shouldn't have gone there," she said eventually. "The warp drive, we weren't ready." "No," I said, "but we were always going to. We couldn't help it." A pause. "That's the thing. Wherever there's a door, someone's going to open it. That's us." She frowned. "Although that's not true either. We could have stayed home. We just never once wanted to." I thought about the vote, about my raised hand, about 11 seconds in a library in front of a human holding a book with a blue spine. "You voted for it," she said. Not a question. I held still. "I know you did. I figured it out a while ago." She was quiet a moment. "I don't blame you." Just a fact she had decided on and wanted me to know she knew. I kept silent. It has been 9 Federation years. My quarters are lined floor to ceiling with crates, vinyl, cassettes, CDs, reels in their flat containers. Clara built the filing system and reorganizes it whenever new logic occurs to her, insisting my own arrangements only ever worked for me. She has learned not to move the navigational components I sort along the port window. She calls them space rocks anyway, every time. There is one record she keeps in a sleeve by itself, away from the system. A novelty song about a dancing crustacean, which she says is the worst thing humans ever pressed to vinyl. She will not play it and will not throw it out. Someone had written on the sleeve in pen a name, a date, and the words, "Sorry about the party." She doesn't know who they were. Neither do I. It stays in its own sleeve, filed under nothing, and she checks on it sometimes the way you check a thing is still where you left it. I have favorites now. There is a musician named Nick Drake who recorded 3 albums and then died at 26, and whose music sounds the way the color blue looks in the gap between a storm ending and darkness coming, and I find I cannot listen to it in front of Clara because of what it does to my face. This morning, Clara found something new. The drone had flagged a sealed shipping container at the edge of a coastal city. Inside, 3,000 unopened vinyl records, warehouse stock, never sold. She knelt on the cargo bay floor and opened the first box with the kind of care I now recognize as the human version of our ritual for handling recovered artifacts, a reverence that isn't religious but isn't anything else either. She held up a sleeve. A man with a guitar, grainy black and white, Robert Johnson. "He recorded these in a hotel room in Texas," she said. "In 1936. He was 24. He died 2 years later. There are 29 songs." She stopped. "I thought they were all gone." She looked up at me. The saline water they called tears rolled down her cheeks. Humans were strange. They cried when they were extremely happy and when they were sad. I sat down next to her. She put the record on the player. One voice, one guitar, close and imperfect and full of age. And inside it, threaded through every note, that thing, the human thing, the thing that made a young man in a Texas hotel room in 1936 play as if he knew someone would be listening eventually, even if he never got to find out who. Clara cried, not loudly. I sat next to her and listened. The sound filled the cargo bay and went on. I am catching up on the human language quickly. Some of the music is alien to Clara, too, in languages she doesn't know either, and we sit with the translator and work out the meaning before we listen. Clara has a shorter lifetime than mine. 80 years, perhaps 90, and then it goes bleak. I have to find a way to preserve the human music, and Clara with it, for I have grown fond of them both. If I hadn't voted for their destruction, I wouldn't be here listening to the Soul People's music, and they would have made even more of these beautiful vibrations. I am guilty of this genocide. I will not take part in such a vote again. I will tend to Clara and keep their music alive and pass it on to others long after she is gone. I will carry the music of the Soul People out to the universe. 23 Federation years is, by most cosmological standards, an unremarkable unit of time. But the universe proceeds to expand without acknowledgement. Clara aged inside it. The freckles across her face remained. Everything else rearranged itself slowly. Silver streaks appeared in her dark hair. She moved deliberately now, as though she had decided motion deserved consideration. Her home planet turned in the observation bay, quieter, the correction teams having pulled back to let the first new growths take hold along the equatorial band. Green was returning to the places that had been gray. I had begun to perceive this too as a form of music. By now the archive filled 3 cargo bays, 2 sealed chambers I had requisitioned over considerable bureaucratic resistance, and a portable climate-controlled unit holding far more than sound. Thousands of digital files recovered from servers that had survived the erasure in underground data centers. Clara's collection became popular. After a hard day's work, crew from various stations would come aboard just to listen to what her breed had made. She set up their players, lent out files by their choice, and kept meticulous record of who had borrowed what, reprimanding anyone who returned a record with the slightest damage. Jazz was the most popular, followed by rock and roll. Surprisingly, death metal was the favorite of the overseer alien race. A bit ironic given their fluffy appearance and calm demeanor, they looked more like the stuffed animal toys the humans had made. We had transported one battered upright piano at absurd logistical cost from a city called Vienna, and Clara played it most evenings after the cataloging was done, working through the same Bach prelude with a focused unhappiness I came to understand was its opposite. The admirers of her live playing outnumbered those who came for the files. But the archive was never only about sound. Clara understood this before I did. In the 15th year, she began to collect far more than audio: history, philosophy, literature, visual art, the full architecture of what humans had been, not only what they made, but why they made it, what it cost them, and what they hoped it would do. She dictated. I transcribed into standard convergence, cross-referencing, expanding, annotating. I learned things I had not known existed. I learned of Baruch Spinoza, expelled by his community for thinking thoughts they were not ready for, who ground lenses for a living and wrote about God and substance and died at 44, leaving behind work that remade how humans understood the universe. I learned of Rosalind Franklin, whose images of molecules gave others the language to describe how life writes its own instructions, and who received none of the credit and died without knowing what her work became. I learned of a boy named Keats, who watched his brother die of the disease that would kill him too, and wrote in the time between poetry of such compressed radiance that Clara read it aloud to me once, then closed the book and looked out the observation window for a long time without speaking. "They kept doing that," she said, "making extraordinary things and then dying before they got to see what it mattered." A pause. "Maybe that's why they had to keep making things. There wasn't enough time to wait and see, so you put it out there and trusted that someone eventually would find it." She looked at me. "Someone like you," she said. I was hurt. At what cost? That was the question that always lingered at the back of my head whenever Clara said such things. It was the philosophy that changed me most completely. I had approached human religious doctrine as the Noku report framed it. Superstition, irrationality, the primitive projections of minds not yet calibrated for empirical thought. What I found, working through the texts with Clara, was more complicated and less comfortable. I found people trying to answer before they had even framed the questions. trying to locate meaning in a universe that offered it to no one, and persisting anyway, knowing the universe cared less. This was not barbarism. It was the most difficult thing I had ever encountered. Noku had reported what they saw. They had not reported what it meant. They were devoid of emotions, as I had always known. What I had not understood, until those years in a cargo bay with a woman who corrected my pronunciation and reorganized my archives without permission, was that being devoid of emotions is not the same as being objective. It is simply a different kind of incomplete. I began composing my own report, unauthorized, personal. I filed it under a classification code reserved for ongoing research with no projected completion date. Its working title was What I Got Wrong. As the audience for human art grew, it was only a matter of time before the larger collective began to question Noku's assessment. The movement had no official name. It was simply people who enjoyed human art they had encountered, one way or another. Eventually, a petition was filed by the most revered alien species in the Federation, and 3 junior delegates submitted a joint inquiry into the legal classification of a species capable of producing recorded artifacts of measurable cultural complexity. Clara read the inquiry from her chair by the portside window. She was quiet for a long time. "They're arguing about whether we count?" she said. "Yes," I responded. "As a species." "Yes." She was quiet again. "I used to argue about that too," she said. "Humans did, whether some of us counted." She turned a page. "We were very bad at that argument." "You are going to be asked to speak," I said. "The petition requires a living representative." She looked up. "I know," she said, and looked back at the page. "I've been practicing." The hall that houses Federation hearings was built to make individuals feel very small in the presence of very large decisions. The ceiling rose 12 standard lengths above the floor. The delegates sat in tiered arcs that rose and rose and rose in the geometry of institutional authority. Clara walked into it at 63 of her Sol years, silver hair loose, wearing a blue sweater she had retrieved from the ruins back on Earth, with the careful walk that age had forced her to consider. She carried nothing except a small bag, its worn strap over one shoulder. I walked behind her. This was not ceremonial. She had asked me to. The chamber held 412 delegates from 67 species. It was, she told me quietly as we entered, the most important room she had ever stood in. "More important than the library?" I asked. She thought about it. "Different," she said. "The library was where I decided to stay alive. This is where I find out what for." The procedural phase ran long. She sat through it with the expression I had learned to read as I am listening to everything and performing patience. When she was finally recognized, she stood and did not use the amplification unit the way most speakers did. She stood beside it, hands at her sides. The chamber was very quiet. "Sisters and brothers of the Galactic Federation," she said, quoting the opening line of a speech delivered by Swami Vivekananda at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago, eons ago on Earth. The words baffled the gathering, as they had baffled that older one. No species had ever addressed the Great Hall as family, let alone a member of a species the Federation had massacred and kept as pets. "I'm going to tell you what I know about human beings," she said. "Not what we were capable of. You've read the reports. I want to tell you what we were. We were afraid, almost constantly. We built our first shelters because we were afraid of the dark. We told stories because we were afraid of silence. We loved each other with the specific, panicked intensity of creatures who knew they were going to lose each other. Almost everything we made because we were afraid of forgetting. The Noku report called us deranged and unpredictable. I've read it. They weren't wrong about the facts, but they missed what the facts were made of. We went to war because we were afraid. We clung to our doctrines because we were afraid. We built our reactors badly because we had only just stopped. We had only just stopped burning things to survive, and we hadn't caught up with ourselves yet. We never did. Nothing alive is ever a finished thing, and you ended us in the middle of it." She reached into the small bag. "I have spent 23 years cataloging what humans left behind. The records, the books, the music, the philosophy, the art, the letters people wrote to each other, the songs they made up to explain what couldn't be explained otherwise." She held up a record sleeve. The chamber's lighting caught it the way light had caught it in a ruined record shop when the Sol system's star came through a collapsed roof. The surface scattered colors across her face. "I want to make an argument, not a legal one." She paused. "A different kind. The species you annihilated was the only one in the known universe that looked at the fact of its own suffering and turned it into something beautiful. Not to deny the suffering, to hold it up. To say, this happened, and we were here, and it mattered, and look what we made out of it. Blues music, Greek tragedy, the Book of Job, every elegy ever written. We were not pretending pain didn't exist. We were refusing to let it be the last word." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but it carried further. "You voted to silence that. And I understand why. The reports said what they said. The protocol exists for reasons. I have spent a long time learning to understand." She was looking at me now across the floor of the chamber. I held still. "But the thing about irreversible decisions is that you have to live with them. And the only honorable way to live with one is to ask what you owe the thing you decided about." She set the bag down. "What you owe us," she said simply, "is a chance to finish." The chamber was completely silent. "I'd like to play you something," she said, "as a request, and as an argument, and as an introduction." She looked at the presiding delegation. "If you'll permit it." I had set up the turntable that morning under Clara's exacting supervision. She placed the record on it herself. She had chosen Beethoven's Ninth. The needle found the groove, the sound came, and underneath it, threaded through every note, that thing I had spent 23 years trying to classify, then given up to, then simply started enjoying without further thought. The human thing. Not the thing that made them reach, I understood now. The thing that would not let them stop. I watched the chamber. Delegates who had stood through whole records in the archive without moving. Species who had kept humans as pets and were only now beginning to understand what they had kept. Species who had voted with me and against me, and species who had arrived too late to vote at all and had been living with the consequences either way. 412 faces encountering, for the first time, the sound of human ingenuity. I watched Clara. She stood with her hands at her sides and her eyes closed and her silver hair loose around her shoulders, and she was not performing anything. She was simply listening the way she always listened, as if sound were something you owed your whole attention to. The 3 freckles across her nose, still there. The record played. Outside the high windows, the distant smear of the field galaxy turned at its ordinary pace, and somewhere in its outer arm, in the system of a middle-aged yellow star, a blue-green planet was quietly coming back to itself. The deliberation lasted 4 standard days. Clara spent most of them in our temporary quarters playing piano, the Bach prelude mostly. On the second night, she played something I didn't recognize, slow and without apparent structure, and when I asked what it was, she said, "I'm making it up," and kept playing. On the 4th day, the presiding delegation issued its preliminary finding, that the Sol system species designated human constitutes a sentient species of documented cultural and philosophical significance, and that their status as companion animals or research subjects within Federation territories is inconsistent with that designation, that all humans so held are to be reclassified as protected persons and offered voluntary relocation to their home system, that a Sol System Restoration Committee be convened immediately, with Clara as co-chair, and that a census of surviving humans be conducted. The final census, compiled over the following months, was 104,217. Clara received the number in the cargo bay, with a cup of the synthesized beverage she called coffee that the fabricator had gotten nearly right after 11 years of incremental improvement. She read it on the datapad, put it down, picked up her coffee. "Enough," she said. "Yes," I said, "enough to start." "Yes." She looked at the crates that lined the walls, floor to ceiling. "We're going to need all of this," she said. "When people go back, they're going to need to know what they came from." "I have already begun additional copies," I said. "Complete archive. Distributed storage across 7 non-Sol systems in the event of us," she said. "Yes." She nodded, drank her coffee. After a while, she got up and put on something she had not played in a long time. A man named Sam Cooke, a song he had written in 1963 about knowing a change was coming without knowing precisely when, which she had told me about in the 17th year, when she found the record and could not explain fully why it made her hold so still. "It's been a long time coming," the voice said, "but I know a change gonna come." Clara stood by the portside window. The Sol system's star was visible, its third planet catching the light. She put her hand flat against the cold glass. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. The music went on and the planet turned, and the change that had been a long time coming was, at last, coming. "I have kept my promise. I am keeping it still." The archive now exists in 14 languages of standard convergence and has been formally entered into the Federation's protected cultural record, which means that something called Dark Side of the Moon and something called A Love Supreme and 29 songs recorded by a young man in a Texas hotel room in 1936, among many others, will outlast any single civilization's capacity to misplace them. Clara is 71 now. She chairs the Restoration Committee with the same patience she brought to correcting my pronunciation, which is to say, apparent patience, which occasionally makes the nose sound. The committee includes 3 scientists, 2 ecological specialists, a Noku data analyst whose presence Clara accepted with a long pause and then a nod that I understood to mean this is the right thing to do, and 1 small woman in a blue sweater who has been trying to get back to something for a long time. The first humans returned to the 3rd planet of the Sol system 8 standard months ago. 47 of them, volunteers. They landed in a coastal region Clara had selected because the soil records suggested early agricultural viability, and also, I think, because it was beautiful. She watched the landing footage 3 times. She did not cry. She made the nose sound, the one my translator still cannot fully classify. I believe I understand it now. It means this is more than I can say, and I'm choosing not to say it out loud. This morning I found, in a collection we had cataloged but not fully processed, a magnetic tape I did not recognize. The label was handwritten and had faded over time. The ink had the impermanence of everything made by hand. It said, "Home recordings, various. 19, 71 to 20, 19. I put it in the player carefully. A kitchen somewhere. You could hear it in the acoustics. A chair scraping, someone clearing their throat. And then a voice, amateur, unpolished, completely unaware of being anything other than itself, singing to someone presumably in the room, in a language Clara and I had not yet catalogued. The recording had not been made for anyone. It had been made because the person making it needed to, for someone in the same room whose name I will never know. Pure human vocals, without any instruments. Someone left it behind. Someone else found it. I went to tell Clara. She was at the piano, the Bach prelude. She looked up. I held out the tape. "I found something," I said. She stopped playing. She looked at it, then at me. She got up. We listened to the whole thing together, in the cargo bay, while the Sol system turned below us, and the planet that was coming back to itself caught the light of its star the way it had caught it for 4.5 billion years before any of this happened. It was enough. The music of Sol people goes on.